Hello there, and thank you for tuning in to see what the world looks like through atheist eyes. I'm Frank Zindler from American Atheist Press, and once again today I will be your host for another program dedicated to showing the world what it looks like to atheists and other skeptics and free thinkers. Today's program, entitled From Doubting McDowell to Seeking Truth, will be the third in a series of 5 interviews I've had the pleasure of conducting with Dustin Lawson, an amazing man whose career has shifted from being a professional trainer of lions and tigers to being a preacher, an understudy to the famous evangelical apologist Josh McDowell, and then to being a God-free author of novels and nonfiction works. He now joins us in our effort to bring reason to the world and to bring the world to reason. Let's listen now to the story of his life as a preacher and an apologist with Josh McDowell, up to his rejection of the life of faith. Well, welcome back. This is our third installment of an interview with Dustin Lawson, a former tiger trainer turned evangelist turned, well, he's here on this show. That's enough said. All right. We left off with you coming to the conclusion that your arguments, or Josh's arguments, and the arguments that you had used just didn't hold water logically or evidentially, and you took a leave of absence, I guess you would say. Okay, then how did you break it to Josh? What happened?
Well, leading up to that moment, like I said, it was a 10-month period of challenging everything, and during this time I went to grad school because I didn't want to stop moving forward and just challenge everything. And I went to grad school at Regent University, which is the school founded by the one and only Pat Robertson.
Hallelujah.
Yes. And so this all happened when I was at Regent University.
A good Christian school.
Hollywood could not have written it any better. But that night in the library, on the second floor at Regent University's library, I was reading a book that was written by the internet infidels. And I closed the book about 11 o'clock at night and just stared at the white wall in front of me for about 30 minutes. And this was the culmination of the 10 months of challenging everything, reading everything I could find. And I finally spoke to myself, no one has any idea what the truth is. I'm now an agnostic. And then I slowly gathered my stuff. I first called a friend of mine who was a theology major in college with me, who was in the ministry, hoping he could talk me out of my skepticism. And it turns out he had already become an agnostic himself. So he didn't help me any in that regard. So I walked outside after gathering my stuff and just stopped in the middle of campus and looked left at the building where the 700 Club was filmed, and then looked right at Pat Robertson's house and just thought, this is about the most ironic place I could be. I became a skeptic in one of the most religious places on earth.
Yeah.
And I drove to the beach, Virginia Beach is where it was, and just walked up and down the beach for a couple hours by myself, just calling out to the stars, God, you got to give me something, because there's nothing in these books, there's no words, there's no arguments. I've gone as far as I can. If this is true, you have to come to me, because I can't go any further in this search.
The dark night of the soul, to quote St. Teresa.
Yes, that very much was that moment. And I got nothing. So after 2-3 weeks, I finally emailed Josh McDowell and said, we got to meet, and told him why. And I flew out. He was in Iowa at the time speaking, and spent a couple days with him and the road team. And one morning, he's like, you want to talk now? And I was like, yes, please. And we went to the lobby of the hotel where he was staying, so just him and I had about an hour conversation. And I was praying on the plane ride there and the whole time there, way up to our conversation, that he had some ace in the hole arguments that he hadn't written in a book or said on a stage, but he was saving them for someone like me that would be able to bring me back and give me the same level of conviction that I once had. Because my whole life was built on this, and the rug had been pulled out from under me, and I needed to put the foundation back because I had no idea what to do. But after an hour of talking and debating with Josh, I realized he had nothing else.
Yeah.
The same arguments,
Yeah.
and that pretty much sealed the deal for me. Because if the guy who's done more research than anybody in history to try and prove Christianity through historical investigation had nothing left, there was no one else that was going to have anything.
Yeah.
And one of the last things that Josh said to me is it's the thing I remember the most from that conversation is he said, Lawson, I don't know if he said Lawson, but Dusty, he said, there's a problem with your epistemology, and that's why you're a skeptic. And if you don't know what the big long word of epistemology means, basically it just means what is your standard by which you measure if an idea is true or not. And I just kind of chuckled, and I didn't say this, but I thought, no, I think your epistemology is really bad.
Yeah.
And I came up with this analogy, and I used it in my first book, that just kind of clarified it so well for myself, the idea of a basketball rim. Do you think I can dunk a basketball? I'm a 5'9" white guy whose vertical leap is beyond his prime.
How well can you jump?
Do you think I can dunk a basketball? Yes or no?
No.
Well, you're wrong, because I can. I can jump from both feet without running and put it down. I can start at the three-point line, throw it up off the backboard, run up, grab it, put it between my legs, and dunk it. Now, I have a disclaimer, though. About 14 inches of disclaimer, because in order to dunk the basketball like that, I had to lower the rim to 8'10".
Okay. All right.
So did I lose credibility as a dunker?
Got me.
Did I lose credibility as a dunker?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Well, you've lowered the rim. Yeah.
Because the standard height for a
standard
basketball
yeah.
rim is 10 feet.
Yeah.
And if you have to lower the rim to be able to dunk, you're not a legitimate dunker.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not, I mean, junior hires don't get to play on an 8-foot rim, in high school and college on a 9-foot rim, and then the pros play on a 10-foot rim.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to play on a 10-foot rim. Why? Because it helps weed out all the wannabes like me who never had a shot at making it to the pros. And you want the wannabes weeded out because we only want to watch the best players play in the NBA.
Yeah.
So you need to keep that rim high. Now, in the same way, it's like an epistemological basketball rim.
Sure.
You want the standard to remain high so that you can weed out all the wannabe ideas and theories that don't measure up, because you want on your team of beliefs the best ideas that actually have the evidence that can meet this standard. But what I realized I was doing, and what most religious people do, and what we've all done at some point in different areas of life, is we know what we want the truth to be, and we subconsciously realize it doesn't match. It doesn't have the evidence that can meet the standard, so we grab that rim and we lower it so our beliefs can then dunk on that.
Exactly.
And so that we can then feel as if we have certainty.
Dustin, in the last program, we talked about one of Josh McDowell's arguments. By the way, this is one of his many, many books. This is a little one, More Than a Carpenter.
Best-selling book.
Yeah, bestseller, yes.
20 million copies.
20 million copies, yes, okay.
And counting. And counting.
And counting. You already told us about the fallacy that the early Christians would not have died for a lie. What was problematic about that? Why don't you share with us some of the other big arguments that Josh uses in this book and in his presentations?
One of Josh's go-to arguments that he uses all the time, absolutely loves it, is the argument that the Old Testament, there's prophecies foretold the coming of Christ, and Jesus fulfills 60 main prophecies with like 330 prophecies that kind of branch off of those.
Yeah.
And then Josh got some mathematician to do the math to show that for all of these prophecies to be fulfilled in one person, in Jesus, would have been like a 1 in, I don't know the exact number he used, but it was like a 1 in 80 million chance, something astronomical, to show that it was foretold, it had to have happened. And I mean, person reads like, man, it's almost like DNA. Like, okay, that had to be the killer, exactly. 1 in 80 million chance. And so people are like, yeah, man, I got it. I'm on board.
Yeah.
And I used it. But then I just began to read these prophecies, and I'm like, how good is a prophecy if it's not a prophecy until after the fact? When it's backwards looking. You need to be able to say, in 2020, this is exactly what's going to happen beforehand. It wasn't like the Jews before Jesus came, had a list of all these prophecies, and they put them up on their door, right? So every day when they go outside, they're like, okay, if I see someone who meets all these, that's the Messiah.
Yeah.
They didn't think these were prophecies. Obviously,
Right.
they didn't think Jesus fulfilled these prophecies because the Pharisees, the
That's
best
right.
Jews on ever,
Yeah.
killed him because
Yeah.
they didn't think
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
then I realized, like, you don't need that many prophecies. You just need one good one.
Yeah,
And
right,
This
yeah.
is the analogy I use. The story of the sword and the stone, Excalibur,
Mhm,
and King
yeah,
Arthur,
yeah.
the legend. I don't know how long this was a legend before
Yeah.
King Arthur supposedly pulled the sword out, but everyone knew the one prophecy, the one legend, that there's rock in the center of town. It's got this sword in it. If whoever pulls that sword out is the next king.
Yeah.
And so you got all these big burly soldiers trying to pull this sword out, and none of them can. And everybody knows, everybody can see the sword, the stone, and all they got to do is pull it out. And then finally, this little scrawny teenage boy, king, or not king at that time, Arthur, walks up to it and easily pulls it out. Everybody can see that. They're like,
Yeah.
okay, that's it. So all the Messiah needed was one good prophecy.
Yeah.
A sword in the stone in the center of Jerusalem,
Yeah.
that for hundreds of years everyone knew whoever pulls that sword out of the rock is the Messiah. You don't need these hundreds of so-called prophecies that don't really look like prophecies until after the fact.
Yeah.
And so-
Incidentally, and for our viewers, a number of years ago, I published an edited edition of Thomas Paine's very last work, Part 3 of his Age of Reason, and it is subtitled Examination of the Prophecies.
Mm-hmm.
And in that book, Thomas Paine went back to all of the major supposed prophecies of the New Testament in the Old Testament. And he showed quite easily and quite fluently that not one of them had anything to do with Jesus, and how all of them had been fudged in one way or another. I annotated it quite profusely to show that actually Thomas Paine was more right than he could have realized. It's amazing. But by the way, it's called Thomas Paine, The Age of Reason, Part 3, Examination of the Prophecies, and it's still available on Amazon. So if anybody's interested in that, you can check that out. But anyway, yeah, these prophecies are nothing of the sort.
Right. So I mean, with the this is how this would have made more sense to me. Jesus dies, raises from the dead, walks straight to the middle of town, and pulls that sword out of the stone, and then walks up to Caiaphas and says, and Caiaphas would be probably like, okay, you're right, got it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Use a myth to catch a myth, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So prophecies, I think, it doesn't hold water. And okay, the idea of the Apostle Paul's conversion. Supposedly, Apostle Paul was like the most antagonistic person against Christianity.
Yeah.
And then he had his Damascus Road experience and became the greatest proponent or the greatest evangelist ever. And if that's true, that sounds like that's a pretty good argument, but we can't verify that he was really that antagonistic. The only record we have is in the New Testament. And also things like with the Apostle Paul, like in, I think it's the book of Corinthians, he says to the Corinthians, hey, look, there's 500 other people who saw Jesus raised from the dead back in Jerusalem.
And nobody else
you know
knows about it. Nobody else has ever heard about this. Yeah.
But that's safe to say, because in those days traveling was so hard. You're not going to go from Corinth to go to Jerusalem to check this out.
You can't check it out.
That doesn't.
And of course, the other thing
either.
there is, at no point had Paul, according to the stories even, at no point had he actually seen the living Jesus. He had a vision, and the theory is that if Paul is a real historical figure, that he probably suffered from temporal lobe epilepsy, which would produce these kinds of experiences. But I mean, if that were true, I mean, just taking a rationalist approach to this, and if he had such an experience, that would be so terrifying that, whatever the veridical nature of it might be, even if it's just a short circuit in the brain, which indeed it would be, that would certainly be a big enough thing to change your life, right? I mean,
Definitely.
you would, but of course there are all the contradictions in that account as
Right.
to who heard what and who saw what and didn't see what and didn't hear what. Yeah, three
But-
different accounts of that in Acts. Yeah.
But ultimately, I can sum it up for me this way. I mean, like, another thing, Josh would try to verify the historical reliability of the Bible. So there's so much manuscript evidence that verifies it. And he would compare the Bible against other historical documents and say, look, the gap between when the New Testament was written and the earliest copy that we have is only 200 years. But look at these other historical documents, it's like 500 years, 700 years, 1,000 years. So the closer... And I agree that the closer the gap is between when something was originally written to the earliest copy, the greater chance there is of it being valid.
Yeah.
But still, 200 years is 200 years. Imagine if we had nothing written about the Revolutionary War. That the earliest copy we have was not written, is the Reagan administration.
Yeah, right.
That,
Exactly.
We didn't have any original documents of Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Washington, or Adams. All we have are copies that weren't copied until the Reagan administration.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Would we still consider the events of the Revolutionary War as assuredly credible the way we think they are?
Yeah. The other thing, of course, about that argument, I've, of course, had to deal with this a great deal since I don't think that Jesus ever existed, this is circular reasoning. It's presuming that Jesus existed. It's
Right.
presuming that Jesus died in the year 30 or 33, take your pick. And then you go to the earliest documents. And by the way, 200 years is not really for a significant document. I mean, it's
Right.
scrappy at that point.
Right.
It's not enough to prove anything, really. And so, it may be that those earliest documents of which we have scraps are indeed the very first ones ever,
Right.
because you're begging the question that these earlier things actually happened.
But in general, I mean, it's the idea that this is all we have. This is all that an all-powerful God wants us to believe this stuff.
Yeah.
Has the ability to give us the exact evidence each person needs and doesn't do it.
Why does God play hide and seek?
Yeah, I mean, okay, there's God, hasn't created us yet, decides to create us of his own free will, and since he's all-knowing, he knows he's creating us within a system, the Garden of Eden, that we're going to fail. And then he also knows, since he's all-knowing, that he's going to allow a hell to be created where everyone gets punished for eternity in a lake of fire, and then he's going to wait 4,000 years to bring the remedy, and when he brings the remedy in his Son, it's a great story, greatest story ever told.
Yeah. Or
But
greatest
then-
story ever sold. But,
Yes. But then the marketing plan for that was the worst thing I've ever seen. Instead of the best marketer of anything is the creator. I'm a writer. I'm the best marketer of my books, not someone else.
Yeah.
If Jesus is the one who truly rose from the dead, he should have gone on a worldwide tour and showed everybody, instead of expect the world to trust 11. I mean, you live 1,000 miles away from Jerusalem in Rome or something, and Peter or Paul or Thomas or Matthew walk up to you, just some stranger, and says, "Hey, in Jerusalem, a guy named Jesus lived, died for your sins. You're a sinner. And then rose from the dead." You're gonna believe that?
Well, listen, though, you mustn't forget that according to the Mormons, Jesus did preach in Mexico.
Did, right. Well, the Mormons would be a whole different show. But, yeah, that for me is just this isn't love. Love would give good evidence. This is the analogy I use. The NFL, they started something where when a rookie, before he even plays his first down in the NFL, they have a program where they'll fly you to Canton to the Football Hall of Fame for free and let you walk up and down the hall just to have that moment of what if you keep clean and you dedicate your life, this is where you could end up in the Hall of Fame. And likewise, we often take children on tours of jails and even put them in the cell and close the why? So that they have a very vivid memory of what your life will be like if you don't live the right way. The same way, Why not give us a tour of heaven when we're conscious, when we're at the age of reason, and say, this is where you could
Yeah,
be if you live
yeah.
for me, and then take you to hell and let you dip your toe in the lake of fire and say, this is what you'll have forever if you don't live for me. Love would give us those examples, I think, and I'm open. If it's true, by all means, give me the evidence, and my mind is open, my heart is open. I would walk right back in and be there. But yeah, you just realize when your mind is possessed by dogma, I say,
Yeah.
and I say free thinking is the exorcist now.
Yeah.
But when your mind is enslaved to dogma, you only see what you want to see. And the
Sure.
greatest example from my life, the story of this happening, because I've had many pastors take me out to lunch to try and bring me back.
Mm-hmm.
And one in particular has done it like 4 or 5 times. And the last time he did it, he said, he's become a faith healer. And he said, come to me to Columbus, Ohio. There's a faith healer in town. He's the guy, he's the real deal. You come and listen to him, and you'll be back. And I said, okay, fine. This is the last time, though, okay? And as we walked into that church, there was this beautiful 35-year-old woman wheeling herself in a wheelchair. And I stopped and talked to her and said, what happened? And she's like, 10 years ago I was in a car wreck. I've been paralyzed from the waist down ever since. And you could see the look in her eyes. She thought she was walking out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to the pastor, I said, hey, she walks out of this church. This was a Friday night. I said, I'll preach on Sunday morning. He's like, all right. And we sat down, 1,000 people in the church, and we listened to that charlatan talk 40 minutes about his books and how much money he needed to raise. And they gave an offering, and I can't imagine how much he actually, thousands of dollars. And then he started his personal ministry time where he just sat on a bar stool, and whoever had a problem, they got in a line, and
the prayer line,
one at a time, they came up, and he was healing their headaches, their eyesight, their shoulders, making pacemakers disappear, turning artificial bones back into real bone. All stuff that you can't see and verify,
of course,
right?
you can't
But
verify.
then, about 10 people back, he saw the girl in the wheelchair, and he stopped for a moment, looked at the audience, and said, sometimes the healing's not instantaneous, sometimes it starts right here, and it might take a few months, giving himself an out.
Yeah, sure.
He'll be out of town. And
He'll be out
then
of
when
town.
she wheeled up to him, he didn't even pray for her to be healed. He prayed for her to be blessed. And this is the difference between this guy and Benny Hinn. Benny Hinn has people who don't let the wheelchair people up on stage.
Yeah.
Or the amputees.
Yeah.
But this guy didn't have that. And he just prayed for her to be blessed, and she just wheeled on. Nothing happened. And I just felt like I was the only one that saw what happened, because the rest of the audience just started cheering for the next person.
Yeah.
And afterwards, even the preacher who took me, he's like, what'd you think? Did you see all those healings? I'm like, Chuck, look, that was their stipulation. She gets out of that wheelchair and walks out of here. I preach. She's still in the wheelchair. This stuff is BS. We're done. Don't ever ask me to do this again. He only saw what he wanted to see, even though it was so vivid.
How poignant.
And I realized this is what I used to do. I only saw what I wanted to see. I only saw arguments that looked like, once you're certain of something, you only see arguments that you think support your views, and you become blind to any possibility of an argument.
Confirmation bias, I guess. Yeah. Well, was there any other main argument that...
Yeah, I think the resurrection, sure, but we have to talk about creationism.
Yeah.
Because this is the whole foundation of it all.
Yeah.
And for me, for all growing up, all through college, I believed Earth was less than 10,000 years old, like 6,000, 7,000 years old. And believed that the dinosaurs, the reason they're extinct is because they were too big to fit on the ark. And so God just let them die off. But I took an astronomy class in college, and it kind of took a couple years for it to sink in. And this was at a Christian college, but he still taught that, hey, it's probably billions of years old. Dr. Mosier, loved it. But I just began to realize the expansion of the universe is where it started for me, that the speed of light is this fast. And if you retract the speed of light back, it takes billions of years for it to get back. And that's just what the visible universe. And I began to realize there's so many things in the universe that make it look old. Why would God have planted this evidence to make it look old if it's really young? And he's like, is he screwing with us again, just like the not very good evidence for the resurrection? And eventually you stop doing the mental gymnastics in your head, and you finally realize, you know what, this stuff is lacking credibility. Darwin might be right, and the universe is old, and the Garden of Eden fell apart for me when I realized that eating the forbidden fruit gives you the knowledge of good and evil. It's wrong to eat the forbidden fruit, but eating the forbidden fruit gives you the very ability that you need to be able to discern that it's wrong to eat the forbidden fruit. So you can't really hold her accountable for not being able to tell the difference between right and wrong, because this is what gives her that ability. And it's
the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and so you don't know that it is. You don't even know what evil is until after you have committed the deed, and so it's clear evidence of a loving Creator.
Yeah. And I mean, hell fell. I mean, I just can't. I can't rationalize the idea of eternal hell. It just does not make sense. It would have. I use this analogy. If you knew you were going, if you were foretold you're going to have 10 kids, and you were foretold which 8 were going to live very horribly painful lives, and 2 were going to have healthy lives, and you have the option to not have those 8 kids, would you choose to just not have them? And I would say I would just choose to not have them. If they're never existed, then they're no better for it, no worse for it. Same way. Why? Since 2 billion people are Christians, supposedly, out of 7 billion, so that means 5 billion are going to hell. Why would you just choose? Just don't have those 5 billion people be born. That'd be such a better existence than burning forever in a lake of fire.
Yeah.
And
something that kind of is peripherally related to this problem, something that I never could understand, and I guess maybe never questioned when I was a Christian, is why does God need praise?
Right.
If God is omnipotent, omni-everything,
he's got this Donald Trump
weakness in him. Why does God look so much like Donald Trump?
Right. Well, maybe Donald Trump is God. I don't know. He thinks he is. But yeah, I don't understand it either. I don't. Yeah.
Did you ever question that, or do you know anybody?
I do now.
You do now. But I mean, did that ever cross your mind back then?
No. Honestly, I never had one doubt.
Yeah.
I never one doubt. I always thought I was doing something wrong if I wasn't getting an answer or getting. It must have been me doing something wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, those are. I mean, that was enough between all that. I could go on for hours of the.
Yeah.
But those are some big bullets that definitely. Just no longer. And the idea of God. I mean, God might exist, but you first have to be able to define God.
And how many are there?
Right. And so I was like, my definition of God has changed probably 10 times. I don't realize it. It just happened so subtly from like age 5 to 10 to 15. Did God change? No. My definition of God changed. So does it really...
Exactly.
Have I believed in 10 different gods? Or I've supposedly believed... And if you can't define God, how can you believe in God?
Well, that's a good point. That's an excellent point.
I'm working on an article. It's why God is probably an atheist. And the first half of it explains why God doesn't believe in any of the gods we believe in. And so I mean, the nature of God. How do you? We all come up with our own view of that and say, yep, that God exists. But the Christian world or the Muslim world, they'll say they believe in God collectively. But then you just start asking them some more specific questions, and you realize that the church follows 1,000 different Jesuses, 1,000 different gods, and 1,000 different Bibles. I mean, just look at, I grew up in a Baptist church, then went to a Nazarene college. Baptists believe that once you become a Christian, you can't lose your salvation, no matter what you do. You can become an atheist and you're still saved. Whereas Nazarenes believe you can lose your salvation. That is not the same God. That is not the same Jesus.
Of course
Those are
not.
fundamentally different. They try to reconcile and rationalize. We still hold to the core. But that belief right there alone is enough to say you guys do not follow the same Bible, God, or Jesus. They won't admit that, but that's such a fundamentally different issue.
And I've always, not always, but ever since I've been an atheist activist, I've argued that no two people at all, at any moment, worship the same God. And
even people, they don't realize that they have different at the same moment
Yeah,
in life
sure,
have different
yeah,
definitions
yeah,
of God for
yeah.
this area of life, for that area of
That's
life.
true. Yeah.
It's just all about trying to protect a feeling of certainty that you have. So you, in order to do that, you have to come up with all these different, allow for there to be multiple gods. Because the problem arises that causes you to question how God's nature is now. So you then go to a different nature of God to protect your feeling of certainty.
Yeah. As you know, I've been in a dispute with a very prominent biblical scholar, New Testament scholar, Bart Ehrman, over the historicity or not of Jesus of Nazareth. And this ties in exactly with what you're arguing about here. I believe that we have proof that Nazareth did not exist at the turn of the era. Therefore, this is disproof of the existence of a particular Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. It's a disproof of the existence of Jesus of Nazareth. Mm-hmm. He could, if there is no Nazareth, there could have been no Jesus of Nazareth, no Land of Oz, no Wizard of Oz. And you can then go through the New Testament. Okay, well, does the Jesus who turned water to wine in Cana exist? Does the Jesus who sassed his family and his mother, does he exist? And just, you can go all through the New Testament and early church history and so on, theology, and ask the question, does this Jesus, I mean, these are not necessarily the same Jesus.
Right.
And so
I would actually, maybe in the next episode, I'd like to go through why I think the Bible's more open-minded than what the church really thinks.
Okay. All right. Well, on that provocative note, maybe that's the sign that we need to sign off for this episode, and we will take up that question next time. So tune in again, and for now, I'm Frank Zindler for American Atheist Press.